All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. So at STEM Fellow, I'll introduce STEM Fellowship SFU really quickly before we pass it over to Lauren. So at STEM Fellowship SFU, we are a branch of the National STEM Fellowship, and we focus on providing students within STEM at SFU with tools and opportunities that will help advance them in their professional lives. So we do career talks such as the one that you're here for today, as well as just encouraging people within STEM to learn more about the various STEM disciplines and how they can help you in your own career. So as a computer science student, learning a little bit more about the sciences about math and engineering, because I personally believe that multidisciplinary learning is super important and it can be very helpful in any field that you're in. So I'm going to quickly pass it over to Lauren to introduce herself.
Sure, I can take it on from here. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm Lauren. I'm from Vancouver originally. I worked as a nurse for 3 years before I got into med school. And I think my story is a little bit less typical because I didn't think about med until 2 years ago around. So I guess I can go on and kind of talk about how I ended up in med. So my first question is, please give an introduction and your educational background. So I'm from Vancouver as well, but then I applied to, I just wanted to get away from home. So then I did my first year of general science at the U of A in Alberta. And then I found that as I was going through it, I did not really enjoy the material that much. And I felt like it wasn't really applicable to whatever I was going to do because I was pretty sure I was going to end up in healthcare somewhere. So then in second year, I just transferred to nursing at the U of A as well. And then it was a 4-year program. And honestly, I loved every part of it. I loved the human physiology and all the patient care that went along with it, and then the relationship-based thing. So I really felt like it suited me super well. And then after that, I went back home and I got a job at BC Children's as a nurse. And then about a year and a half into it, I was really enjoying nursing and I love the patient interactions and really helping people. I found it really rewarding, but there was a part of me that kept on wondering the rationales and the reasonings behind the care that I was providing and all the medications I was giving. I kept on asking questions like, why this antibiotic and not the other one? And then I was getting more frustrated because I didn't know the overall picture and the overall plan. So then that's when about 2 years ago, that's when I looked into actually getting into med. And I was like, okay, so it seems like I don't have as much research as needed. So then I went part-time on my bedside BC Children's job. And then I got a part-time job at research nursing at the Vaccine Evaluation Center. And then I wrote my Mcat last summer and I'm here now. So it was a bit of a whirlwind, but I mean, I'm happy I'm here. I am a little bit older than a lot of my classmates, but not that much older. But yeah, that's how I ended up here. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then do you want me to just ask you the questions that we have and then allow everyone else to ask their questions as well if they have any?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between your undergraduate studies and then med school, in terms of studying, extracurriculars, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So during my undergrad, I remember that my first year was quite heavy because we had anatomy, pharmacology, physiology, pathophysiology. So it was quite heavy at that time. I think I studied a lot of my days. And then, but then when it hit clinical, then everything changed, obviously. And I was there in the hospital from 6 a.m. until 3 or 4 p.m. And I would do patient research afterwards. I would honestly say in terms of stress, I feel way less stressed right now because really all we need to do is pass, but then it is a lot more material than before as well. It's kind of insane, and in some ways it does feel like you're just getting hit wave after wave with material that just doesn't stop. And sometimes when they do a lecture, it's a 60-minute lecture, and somehow the PowerPoint presentations are 80 slides, and then they go through each one so super quick, and it's quite condensed and dense. But I would say it's definitely very doable, and I don't have very much background in basic science at all. I only did 1 year of general science, and that's honestly good enough. You don't need a whole in-depth of a lot of general science knowledge. So if you're from like business background or computer science, you're going to be totally fine in med as well. And I would say it's a lot of memorization and like pattern techniques or pattern recognition. But because I have my nursing background, I think it helps a lot because it makes me remember all the patients I took care of who had the same condition. And now I just understand like why I gave that medication that I did and why they presented the way they did. And in terms of extracurriculars, like I would say during undergrad, I kept myself quite busy, and it wasn't because I was like trying to go anywhere like med, but it was just a lot of the things that I was interested in. So like for instance, like other than the very first year of undergrad, I worked all throughout my undergrad as well. So like in second year, I worked as a res life staff, and I worked in a first year res called Lister. And then in second year, I worked in international house, and I worked with international students in residence as well. And I was very involved with it. And throughout those 2 years, I was in nursing. So I did a lot of health promotion, and I was able to have a like a little health initiative that I was able to present by poster. And then I ended up getting like a Healthy Campus Award. And then the other 2 years, I did more nursing stuff. So I was VP academic for nursing. I had a research project for one summer that I looked into how the homeless people can use the libraries better. So it was like a quantitative and qualitative mixed method study. And then in third year, I worked full-time in the emergency and acute geriatric psych unit as a student nurse, and I got paid for that, and I learned a ton. And I also worked in home care nursing throughout during just classes. And then yeah, otherwise, like I guess I also co-founded a club, and then it was just everything that I was interested in though. Like honestly, it didn't feel like a burden. And I think if you guys take anything away from me talking to you guys, like it sounds like it's a lot. Like I remember being on the other side like last year and hearing all these like freaking med people talk about what they did and being like, oh yeah, everyone will make it in. Don't worry, you'll find yourself on the other side. And they kind of sound like crazy people that are like workaholics. But honestly, like when I was in undergrad, like I wasn't thinking about med, but I just did stuff that interested me and I found meaningful. And when I look back at my extracurriculars, I notice it's a lot of like just helping people and helping like marginalized population, like homeless people, like university students that are stressed, international students. I also did a presentation about residential schools to Alberta students. So like that's also marginalized population. And like working with seniors for my volunteering club, I just connected students who liked music, and I connected them to seniors who were like quite isolated in senior homes. So like it all makes sense, and it was all stuff that I like loved doing and I found meaningful. So I think if you find something that you like are feeling really passionate about, then even if you're involved in it and it sounds like you're like a crazy person who's doing everything, it actually doesn't feel like that to you because it's just like something that is meaningful and doesn't add on any more burden to you. Yeah. And I'd say like right now I'm just as involved, but it's all stuff that I'm interested in, like talking to you guys. It's fine. Like it's mentoring. I enjoy that. I do some research as well in pediatric infectious disease right now, but I still find that interesting. It's related to my work that I was doing before as a nurse. Yeah, I'm also like part of a few committees and like a lot of wellness things that I'm interested in, and I also like med education a lot, so I'm also involved in those. But yeah, it doesn't feel like stressful or anything. It feels okay. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then, so I know that you went into, like, when you did your MCAT, you didn't have as, um, like you said, you had nursing before that, right? So do you have any tips for students that are going to be starting to write their MCATs now, or like they're starting to study for it, and how they can get started?
Yeah, for sure. I think that was the biggest hurdle for me because I realized in order to get into like apply to med, that was the only thing I needed. So honestly, when I looked at the books at first, it's super daunting and there's so many courses and I have like zero OChem or biochem knowledge. And as I was writing this, so I actually ended up signing up for like a prep course. And I think more than anything, it just kept me on track rather than helping me a lot. Because I felt like when I went to the lectures, it was so condensed and so fast that if you just depended on that, you wouldn't learn anything. At least for me, because I had like zero background knowledge. So then at least it kept me accountable. So then I would read the chapters and study them before I went to class every day. So then it kept me on track at least. And it taught me some like different studying habits too, because it forced me to do practice exercises and practice exams that I probably would have put off until like way later if I studied by myself. Yeah. So I would say like those books are really helpful. And then if you can sign up for some kind of prep course, that could be helpful. But if you're a very self-motivated learner with like a good background knowledge in science, I don't think you need to necessarily sign up for an expensive prep course. But it's totally up to you. I just went all in for it. So it's just depending on how much time you have and like how urgently you need to get in, I guess. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just want to ask everyone, make sure that if you have any questions or if you want to ask Lauren to elaborate on any of her experiences, just dump it into the chat and then we can get to it. And if you'd like to ask it out loud, just use the raise hand function. I think we have that. And then we can I'll just call on you and you can ask your question. We do have a question from Gary. How long was your MCAT prep?
Yeah, so I was working at BC Children's, but I lived in North Van still. But then my prep course was at UBC, so I actually like moved and I subletted at UBC for that summer. So I was there from mid-May until I wrote the MCAT, which was early August. So yeah, like 3 to 4 months ish. But I was still working, but I took all my vacation for nursing at that time, so I worked very minimally. And for my other job, I only picked up casually. So I would say like throughout it all, I probably studied like 8 to 10 hours every day independently, and then I went to like a 3 to 4 hour lecture after in the evenings. So it was very busy days and long days. And then I actually found that when I picked up nursing shifts, it was more of a break for me because I didn't have to think about MCAT for just the one day or the time. So yeah, it was very intense, like condensed, concentrated 3 to 4 months of like just MCAT basically. And I find that actually is a strategy that a lot of people go with. I tried studying by myself throughout as I was working as a nurse for the year that I was thinking of applying to med, but I honestly made it through like 3 or 4 chapters in chemistry. Like it was nothing. So yeah, I would say like the concentrated just doing MCAT for whatever period, it honestly sucks, but at least you get it done with. And then your scores are actually like surprisingly good for the short amount of time. Yeah.
And so when you were looking into applying to med school, how did you decide what med schools you wanted to apply to? And then if you got into more than one, how did you choose which one you wanted to go in? Like, what did you look for?
Yeah, sure. Actually, my GPA limited me quite a bit. So I hope this is going to be like encouraging for you guys because I remember reading like what was it? Oh, pre-med 101 for the first time and being like, oh my gosh, everyone has like above 4.0 GPA. I didn't even know this was possible, to be honest. So it was really discouraging for me. So I'll just like tell you guys what my GPA is. Like, I think cumulative over the 5 years, it was like 3.69 and I'm still here. So it's definitely possible. And I know one of my peers who got into med at the U of A this year, and then they had a 3.6 GPA that was adjusted. So that's taking out the lowest year. Um, yeah, so because my GPA was so low, and then my MCAT was fine, but as you guys probably know, the CARS really is dependent on where you can apply as an out-of-province person, and you kind of need a 128 for most schools. So that also limited me because my CARS wasn't 128. So I could only apply to in-province schools. So I applied to UBC. And because I did my undergrad at the U of A and I worked there over a couple summers, that made me in province for Calgary, which was so weird, but that's just how it works for their status. Like if you spend, I think it's 24 months consecutively in Alberta after the age of 15, then you're seen as in province. So I only applied to those two schools. I didn't even think I would get an interview, but I got interviews at both schools. And then UBC, I think, rejected me because I did well on everything else. But then I think my MCAT was low. So I think that's why I didn't get accepted. And the U Calgary, actually, I was surprised that I got accepted after all. So yeah, I do feel lucky because I think the in-province status and all that kind of like BS has a lot to do with where you can even apply. Yeah, I was thinking about applying to U of T potentially the next cycle if I had to, because I noticed that they had a lower cutoff for MCAT and GPA. But the essay part kind of put me off, so I just didn't last year. Yeah.
And so from Ben, how difficult were the MCAT questions?
Well, psychology was pretty easy. I studied very minimally for that But then chem honestly killed me. Yeah, that was not fun. And then bio was really hard too, but I did surprisingly well on it. And cars like is so frustrating because you practice, but it's really hard to get a higher score. So I think it drives science students also crazy. I would say overall, like it's such a long exam and it's really hard to study for it and so much material. But I would say actually spend more time on the practice questions themselves and just getting used to the format of the exam. I found that it like my content knowledge is probably honestly not that strong. Like I just crammed it in 3-4 months, right? And you guys have done like 3 years of science courses. So it's not really that, but it's more like getting used to the way the MCAT is written because the excerpt and like the writing is so long. You have to read it so quickly, and then the questions are also very like vague, and it's a lot like cars being integrated into all the sections that you'll see, except psych. Psych is really easy, but even chem and bio, it's a lot like cars, the way it's structured. So I would say just get used to the format of it. It's less about the material and what you actually know, I would say.
And then a question from Jessica, would you recommend taking psych courses beforehand?
Oh my gosh, no, you don't have to. I like I did it for fun one time and I think I got like 127. And that was just like common sense because all the facts are actually in the excerpt, a lot of it. And there's like certain terms you need to know, but a lot of them you can just kind of academy it and just learn it quickly. Um, yeah, I don't know. But I think I'm like better at the psych stuff than like chemistry though. So maybe I'm like a little bit biased, but I know most people got like quite high on psych.
What do you think your strongest areas were in terms of academic and non-academic when you applied for U of, I think you applied for U of A and UBC.
Yeah, well, it definitely wasn't academics, guys. So like, you guys can all do it. It was definitely the extracurriculars for me, I'm sure, because okay, so I'll tell you on UBC when I looked at my breakdown of scores afterwards because I didn't get in. I saw that my extracurriculars, like my pre-interview score for my application, and that's including my like my crappy GPA and Mcat. I was at the out of province mark cutoff, so I was quite high on it. Um, so I'm guessing that it compensated for my like lower GPA and MCAT. Yeah. And I would say that I had tons of employments. Like for UBC, you have to list like pretty much everything you've ever done. And I think for employments, I had, I want to say like 15 or 20 employments from high school until now. And they were all quite different. And a lot of them were like in professional areas, and like my nursing ones easily were like over 4,000 hours, some of them. So um, yeah, I think my just like real life experiences helped a lot. And it's not like I did it to get into med, but it just like happened, and that's kind of what I like to do. So yeah. And then I think my interview was quite strong too. Like I remember I would say things that I like. They always ask you questions like, "Oh, what mistake have you made, and what kind of conflict have you had?" And then I think people tend to have like more similar answers, but I remember like I would say mine, and then usually there was like someone interviewing me would be like quite surprised or like they would have some kind of reaction. So it was more like a unique story, I think. Yeah.
How did you organize taking the MCAT full lengths into your study schedule?
Um, I think we started doing that about 1 month into our course. It was really early on. Um, yeah, I almost wish I like did it more though. Like people say that you should start taking full length stuff about 1 month before your MCAT day, and I actually agree with that. It really sucks, honestly, but as you do it, you actually get the hang of it. And I felt myself like getting so much more used to the content, but it was already like too late by for me because I started my full length about 2 weeks before my MCAT. So it was really late, and I think I only did 2 full length. But if I did 4, like who knows, like maybe my score would have been a lot better, but I don't know. But yeah, I would just say definitely start it earlier than later. Even if you feel like you like don't know anything about the content that you're actually getting tested on, still just do it. Like you need to get used to the format. Yeah.
And then do you want to talk a little bit more about the interview process and what kind of questions were asked?
Sure. I can't really go into like too much detail, as you guys know, but a lot of it, like it depends on the school. So for UBC, it was a lot of just more traditional MMI. So you like go through the stations, you have like 3 minutes or 2 minutes to think, and then you have 7 minutes to talk. And a lot of it, some of it did ask like the very typical questions like, oh, like tell me about your mistake or like conflict. So I would definitely say have like some solid stories for those, and try saying it to multiple people and see what their reactions are, and like adjust it as you go or pick the strongest one. Those are going to come up for sure. And then otherwise, like a lot of it was just like random like topics like oh, like what are your thoughts about this issue. Yeah, and then a lot of like ethical scenarios, and like what would you do scenarios. um, Yeah, and then at Calgary it was quite different because about half of it was more like that. But Calgary actually had a lot of healthcare questions, but UBC had pretty much none that were healthcare. So like I don't think I had an edge as a nurse to interview UBC necessarily, but I definitely had an edge in Calgary because they asked like very specific healthcare questions that you like, you know, when you Google MMI questions and they have the really traditional like organ transplant and all these things, and you're like, okay, like no one's gonna ask me that, but Calgary actually does, and some schools actually do. So those were really handy. And then Calgary also asked a lot of panel questions. So one station was literally, they had my application in front of them, and then it had all my extracurriculars, and they asked me questions about that. They're like, elaborate on this. So if you did stuff to just pad your CV, like good luck filling those 20 minutes because they can see right through you. Yeah, so yeah, it was more interesting and personalized, I think, for Calgary, but it was also about twice as long as UBC's.
Okay. And what's something that surprised you about med school once you got in terms of like, you know, like I don't know how to word this,
Everything.
but
Yeah.
just in general.
Sure. There's another nurse who also got into med school at UBC this year, and since I started earlier in July and he was starting in September, I like warned him. I'm like, hey, like you're gonna get like a butt ulcer, like no joke, like you're gonna be sitting for so long. You actually do so much sitting, like you're gonna be studying a lot, and it's a lot of the day, but it's not hard material, it's just a lot. And then otherwise, like I think I was really worried about the school aspect because I knew my GPA and my Mcat weren't strong, so I thought maybe I wasn't like good enough in school to be in med, but I actually find that I'm like doing quite well, so I don't think it's like hard material to grasp. um, so don't worry about that part at all. Like it's actually quite, and then I've heard people say like from like biochemistry backgrounds and stuff like that, they're like, oh, med school is like so easy. And I think I kind of understand, because in a way I think it's easier than nursing school too in some areas. So yeah, it's just a lot of material, but it's not hard, so don't worry too much about it. And then in terms of the students, like the variety also surprised me a lot. I thought I would be like an old fart, like being about 4 years older than like most people, and like, oh my gosh, how I'm gonna like relate to them. But it's not like that at all. There's definitely like moms in our class, like there's like pharmacists who've been practicing for 10 plus years and own their own pharmacy who are here. There's like 3 other nurses. There's also like a physician assistant who worked in the militaries for like 20 years and they're in their 40s. There's people from the fighter, like a pilot program. There's some people from like business. It's really quite various. So like whatever background you're in, and you might feel like an imposter right now, but don't feel like that. There's like definitely a spot for you in medicine, and we really appreciate all that background because they bring so much other stuff into it that you wouldn't learn from like a typical class. So we all appreciate them a lot.
Okay, I think I'm all out of questions. Does anyone else have other questions? How long was your undergrad?
My undergrad was 1 year of science and then 4 years for nursing, so it was 5 years. So I took an extra year. And then I can answer some of the other questions that Jas sent me before that we didn't cover yet. Let's see. Okay. Okay, there's a question about what is the main factor that prevents prospective medical students from getting accepted into medical school? I can talk about that, or like what common pitfalls do medical students have or when applying. Um, I think we all like fall into this a bit, but I think if you focus more on the end goal of getting into med and then you are cognizant of that and you choose the activities that you do, then I think you have the big risk of doing things that sound impressive on paper, but honestly, you don't have much passion for. So I would be very careful about that because, like, of course, like with the GPA and everything, you need to maintain such a high grade and be involved in so many things. If you are involved in too many activities that you're not truly interested in, it'll just drain you and it'll take away so much of your energy. And I find that though, like I actually know applicants like that who applied so many times and interviewed, but they do not do well in interviews at all because when they are asked about certain things or even just things like what kind of mistakes or what kind of conflict, they like just don't have much that they've learned or taken away from the experiences, that they don't have much to talk about. And even if they do, it's like very cookie cutter answers. And people can tell like right away that it's not a genuine, passionate answer. And I think because there are so many people from all aspects of life and like all walks of life that have had such variety of experiences, if you are going in there with like a very typical like padded CV that you don't care about and you're trying to make yourself sound like you care, it's really easy to see through that for interviewers. So I'd like very highly caution you against it, just because like just getting a high GPA and keeping that and maintaining that is so hard. And then I think another thing is like I remember when I was in the first year of science, like there were lots of like pre-meds around me who were like doing really well in school and they were doing research and all this, but they were like quite quite like snobby in a way. Like they thought they were better than other people and they like show off about their GPA a lot and all that. I would really highly caution you against that too, because I think once you have that mindset, when you interview, I think that attitude almost shows as well. Like it's really hard to hide that. And I don't think med school is looking for people like that necessarily to become physicians to serve their patients, because it's a very like humbling job. Not like, it's not like being a CEO, you know, we don't get to like be super fancy. So yeah, I would just be like cognizant of that. Another question that we didn't go into was, is shadowing a physician necessary or beneficial for undergrads wanting to attend med school? For this question, I said like, no, I don't think so. And I don't actually think it's allowed if you're not a med student to shadow physicians. I would say like talks like this is really good to see if you even vibe with this kind of work. I know a lot of med students who actually get into med school and then realize that this isn't what they're looking for and then they drop out. And I think that's totally possible because on the media and how they portray physicians is very different. So I would say like maybe listen to podcasts and like look into like more like not the just like Grey's Anatomy, but like, you know, like actual reality shows where they talk to real physicians and like see what they do and see if you really are interested in that. And I would say that like medicine is like a very long route, and I know because I've like worked closely with residents, and like the residency is very hard as well. So like it's definitely not an easy route, and if you are in it for the wrong reasons, I think it can really cause you to burn out as well and like kind of like not see the point in what you're doing. Since it's so many years too, and you don't make money for until you're like unattending, and that can be like many years down the road. So I would say just like do a really good check with yourself to see if you're okay with that much schooling, really delaying your other life chapters for as long, and then yeah, just putting in some really hard work and going through a lot of competition for the compensation that is really not as great as a lot of the other fields if you did the equal amount of work. Yeah.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Did you say you did a lot of volunteering?
Yeah, I did some volunteering too.
So what kind of
Mhm.
volunteering areas did you go into?
Sure. So like the club that I co-founded was a volunteer thing that like brought students to senior homes, and then we were able to like play piano for them and give piano lessons and do music things with them. So that was a big volunteering for me. And then otherwise, like the residential school presentation was a bit of a volunteering too. But I do agree that probably in my application, like one of the weaker parts of my application was probably the volunteering aspect, because I just did so much like employment stuff that I was more involved in. that it wasn't as much volunteering. Like other than that, like I did like leadership things like VP academic for nursing, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's really volunteering.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I was doing that for a year. And then I also did like I coordinated some food programs for at-risk youth. And then it was a club called Shine at the U of A, and then it's run by healthcare students. And then we were able to do weekly dinners and gatherings and then have a relationship with these youth and have them trust us and then provide health promotion opportunities. So like stuff like that. And I did like other initiatives, like health promotion initiatives that weren't like volunteering, but it was like
Yeah.
still doing things not getting paid, I
So
guess.
how did you get into these volunteering activities? Like, were they a part of your school or?
I just did it because like I liked it.
No,
No, what do you mean though? Yeah.
no, like how did you find out about them is what I mean. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I don't know,
Yeah.
like I just kept an eye out for things that interested me, and then like in emails and stuff like that, it just came up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of them
Okay.
are school involved actually. So um yeah, I guess I just checked my emails, and then I kept a lookout for clubs that interested me, and then
Yeah.
I tried to see if I could get involved.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, and is that something that like once a week or more than once a week during your studies?
Um, I would probably say not any more than once a week. So it wasn't super heavy volunteering at all. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I mostly just worked more throughout school.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Was there like any specific volunteering you're looking for? Like,
Well, no, it's just I'm well, I was volunteering at a hospital, but it's only as a wayfinder, and I don't think it's enough. So I'm thinking about like what kind of volunteering positions would make a bigger impact towards my, my
yeah,
my goal.
totally.
Yeah.
My very first volunteering was just like going to senior homes and playing piano for them. And that's how it all started. And then that's when I started thinking about starting the club. So like
Okay.
maybe just like a smaller scale, like I know it's not the hospital, but you could still be in a healthcare setting, or like if you have a population you're more interested in, like children with
Yeah.
disabilities or something like that. There's always like camps and things you can volunteer as a counselor.
Yeah.
Or if you're interested in like first aid, you can volunteer for like Red Cross or something for first aid, and then be there for like different events.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe just like start with like what population you want to serve, and then what kind of things interest you, and then like look into organizations outside. Like it doesn't have to be hospital,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, and those are, I know, really competitive, I heard. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
so there's
Okay.
definitely other avenues as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm. And you
Um,
also had like a lot of experience, like employment, right? Because you worked as a nurse, so that really helped you out.
Yeah, and then as a student nurse too, I think it also opens up a lot of opportunities, like even during undergrad. So I had
Yeah.
like 3 nursing jobs during undergrad, not including my research nursing job. So like that all came up throughout my undergrad, and then
Wow.
I had 2 like registered nurse jobs after I
Yeah.
graduated. Um, but honestly, I don't know. It was just, yeah. So I think it is different because like I remember some of my science friends, like they were trying to get the same like a summer award grants, and like they didn't pay as well, and they were like super competitive.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I guess on the flip side, it's like aren't there more opportunities in science undergrad to be involved because a lot of people are wanting to go into med, like, or no?
Not that I know of so far. I mean, I've all been to Douglas, and there's really not much there, I don't think.
Okay.
I didn't find any. Yeah.
Mm.
So I don't know how much there are in SFU. Still my first semester, so
Yeah.
yeah. Did you go to SFU as well, or?
No, I just went to Alberta. Like I
Oh,
never did
okay.
school in BC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
Um,
and so do you think that volunteering in a healthcare setting is better for the CV?
I definitely think like you need some kind of healthcare experience. whether it's volunteering or like working in some sort within the healthcare setting, even if it's like an assistant at a dentist or like a receptionist at a family med clinic or something. Like, I think you need something in healthcare. Like, if you have zero healthcare experience and you've done everything else in all the other fields, then to the person who's like evaluating that, it just doesn't make sense. It's like, okay, are you actually interested in healthcare, or are you just like applying to med for, like, I think you need some kind of exposure for sure. I'm just trying to think like how else you could get involved in healthcare if you're not in like nursing or other healthcare. Like, I think you could do like healthcare. A lot of healthcare is just helping people. So if you worked with like children with disability or seniors who are post-stroke, and you just even help to like, you just worked with them in a senior home setting or like at their own home or through an organization, I think that could still be seen as healthcare, because we realize that like you can't all find yourselves in a hospital and a clinic, right, without like all the qualifications. And I know that the research things are competitive even for like R8 research assistant jobs. So I think as long as you have something that is relationship based, that is helping people that are in need, I think that's good enough. And if it's something related to healthcare, even like remotely, like it's people with disability or seniors who are hard, like have hard time mobilizing, I think even that is good enough. But as long as you have something like that, then it shows that, okay, you want to serve people who are in need and you want to serve patients. That actually makes sense. But if you have like zero in anything like that, I think that's a little bit red flaggy for people. And I've heard that from a couple people. So yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? Did I miss any questions?
Wait, this one isn't for Lauren, but for anyone who's going to SFU, I heard that they do mock Mcats. Is that true? If anyone knows.
Yeah, it was. It's posted around SFU when it was in person, but I haven't really seen anything about that recently since it's been online.
How long has it been?
I mean, I started in 2018, so I've seen it. It happens like twice a year. So it's like November and February something.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's like the full MCAT length, everything. But
Is
it's a
that
mock.
just something you sign up for, or how do you get into that?
Yeah, you got to sign up for it. They like advertise it, but I don't know how they're doing it now. I haven't seen it recently.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. I'll look into it then.
I know SFU also has a pre-med society, so it's a club you can join.
Does it?
Yeah, if you have Instagram or Facebook,
yeah, sure. Instagram's fine.
yeah, I think you can just search up pre-med society or SFU pre-med. Here, let me try and.
Okay, I'll look.
I think it's SFU pre-med.
Yeah, SFU pre-med club.
Oh, okay, got it.
And Lauren, I had a question. So how about if I'm doing some volunteering thing that's like, it's very like kind of personal. It's I meet one person and I train them. It's like a senior lady, and would that be like a good I don't know how to explain it, but would it be proper to put on that extracurricular for the application? Because like in terms of references and stuff, like I'd be getting it directly from her, and like it's not going to be that verified, I guess, like because like she can't always like receive the call or like email that efficiently. So yeah, that's basically my question. Like, do you think it's okay if I keep continuing with that, even though it's not that, like professional, I guess?
I think it's fine. Like, I think if you have like anything that shows that you are helping people, and then I would say that right now, like healthcare is becoming more flat in terms of hierarchy. So like, we don't want doctors anymore who are like standing at the foot of the bed, like calling out orders and then not talking to patients. So if you have like relationship that is strong and long-term with people, I would say that's like a big bonus. And I think healthcare is always about serving people. So if you can somehow like continue to get involved with the marginalized population who need help, like seniors and like Indigenous students perhaps, or like students from lower income, or like, you know, like people that you can help from your position. I think those are also seen like very, very favorably. So yeah, so I think you can definitely go on and continue that. I would just say for verifying, try to find like, yeah, it's hard because she's, because usually for verifying they need someone who is like in a higher position, like or like supervisory level, with their phone number as well as their email. So if she's not someone who can do that, like, is there anyone else who like oversees you in any way who is more reliable in terms of verifying? Because they do verify, like they wait for those.
Yeah, like there are people, but I don't have a close relationship with them. Like I have the close relationship with the person because I only saw them in the beginning when I got trained by them to train the lady, and now I just separately like one-on-one train the lady.
Oh, you mean in terms
yeah,
of reference? Because I think reference, it's fine if the lady gives it to you, but in terms of like verifying, you kind of need someone who can like check emails more regularly for that
okay.
activity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And then for the verifying ones, some schools do ask like, oh, on a scale of like 1 to 10, like, do you think this person is fit to be a doctor? Like how fit and stuff. But most schools don't do that. Like I'm pretty sure UBC doesn't, and I don't think Calgary does either. So in terms of verifying, you just need someone who are literally like, yes, I've seen like Gary do this, and I can verify that this is like not a lie that he's just putting on the application. That's all you need. Yeah.
All right, I guess that's all the questions that people had. Yeah, thank you, Lauren, for doing this. I think it was really helpful for everyone that came out.
Yeah, I hope so. And then, yeah, like if you guys are successful in getting interviews and stuff, I guess like one advice I can give is try to like write down things that were meaningful to you or you learned a lot from, and kind of like start journaling and collecting these events and these experiences. Yeah.
That's a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise, like, I know it's like, it seems like such a long road and Mcat does suck, but you guys definitely are at a way better position than I was last year writing it. So I'm sure you guys can do it too. Yeah. But yeah, okay. It was nice talking to you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming out.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karar Almamar. It's a pleasure to have everyone here with us today. Yeah, today we just have a career talk with Jas Hans, who is currently a medical resident. He graduated from UBC's med school. Yeah, and where he and before that, prior to that, he attended Simon Fraser University, where he almost graduated in a Bachelors of Science. But yeah, so he graduated out of UBC Med School in 2016. Today, Jas Hans is a medical resident at the Abbotsford Regional Hospital, where he's specializing in family medicine. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today, Jas. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for the warm introduction, Karar. You're too kind. It's going good, man. It's going good. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, so to get started, just so that we can get to know you a little more, can you please start off by telling us a little more about your journey so far to becoming a medical resident, so your experience, how university went?
Yeah, absolutely. Like many young people, I went to university right out of high school. I went to SFU. I went to sciences. Went to do sciences, and I think I was going to major in chemistry or biochemistry, between the two. But as you said, I almost graduated, so I didn't quite finish. I did 4 years at SFU, but I was also doing science and business at the same time. I was fortunate enough to get into medical school at UBC, so kind of just went there. So I did a minor in organic chemistry, and I was also going to be doing like a double major in business at the same time. And then from there, I went to medical school at UBC in Vancouver. So that took about 4 years, and quite a few years later, here we are now. Now I'm doing my residency at Abbotsford Regional Hospital out in Abbotsford. So it's a family medicine residency, but majority of it's spent in the hospital, learning all the various different rotations. Is there anything? I don't have anything formal planned, but so we'll make this more of a Q&A. But is there anything specific you want to know, Karar, or something you want me to speak on?
Yeah, for sure. So so that's good. So now we know quite how your journey a little bit overall went. So can we talk a little bit more about the extracurriculars? Because a lot of prospect physicians, like prospect medical students, we don't know in terms of extracurriculars where our effort should be going. So what did your undergraduate volunteering include, or in other words, what were your extracurricular activities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think kind of everyone knows you need to get as best grades as possible. But then the extracurriculars can be more ambiguous for medical school.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that I did, and like even just speaking to people in my class, like in medical school, like people have like a vast array of extracurriculars. Some of the things that I did was, so I actually worked throughout like high school and university, and in my job, I used to work first in a bakery, and then I worked in a jewelry store, and then I became like a sales lead. So just kind of having a leadership position in my job, and like that's actually still considered an extracurricular working. So it doesn't necessarily have to be volunteer hours. You can get paid for some of the work you do. I know as students, okay, we don't typically make a lot of money, so any extra cash is always nice. So I actually had a job all through undergrad, and so that was I think that was something that helped me out, because in my job I was able to gain more leadership positions, and then I became like a sales lead of 5 people. So it doesn't necessarily have to be any one particular job, but that was just for me. I worked, and I know a few people in my other class had careers before they went into medical school, versus some people had never worked at all. So there's a whole wide variety of things. So that was definitely one of them. Another one was like leadership. So when I was at SFU, I was actually on the Samuel Fraser Student Society. I was on the board of directors, and I was elected as the science rep. So I was on the student society. I was on the Senate because of into politics and whatnot, and student leadership. So I threw my hat in the ring and ran, and luckily I won. So that was something I think being in that kind of student leadership role also can be viewed in a positive light, because you kind of, especially with the student society, because we were in charge of like a lot of staff, a big budget, and having that kind of responsibility that comes with that is also part of leadership. If you look at the UBC like extracurricular guidelines, the main things they want to see is like long-term, like you don't have to have a lot of activities, nor do you have to have hospital volunteering or anything like that. But what they do want to see is like long-term commitments. So things you've been doing for a few years, they do kind of like to see that, or things that whether they're showing leadership or you're taking a lot of responsibility or those kind of things. And that being said, even if you're doing something for like a short-term amount of time, you could definitely throw that on your application. Like you'll never get much taken off. But just I remember when I read through the UBC application, those are some of the things they've mentioned. So those are probably the 2 biggest ones, like the student society and like actually just working as a job. A lot of people think you have to have like hospital volunteering or something like that. I don't think I actually even like stepped foot in a hospital until I got to medical school.
Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't do so I didn't do any hospital volunteering, or like volunteering with any kind of no hospital volunteering or that kind of thing. I did do volunteering, but mine was a little bit more different. Like I volunteered at my high school, like tutoring kids. I did some volunteering in the community with like coaching or helping like my friend with coaching soccer practice. So I did that for a few years, and that kind of stuff. But mine was more like community focused, so it doesn't ever necessarily have to be like hospital volunteering or anything like that.
I see. Well, thank you for sharing that. I've heard that there's like some sort of types of volunteering that's more preferred. Is that true or no? And do you agree with that? Like, if you volunteer for a certain, say if you're volunteering for a nonprofit or if you're volunteering for a company, it's looked at differently. Is that true or no?
I mean, unfortunately, I don't have I don't have the black box of the formula, right? The million dollar question. But as far as of the type of volunteering, I don't think it necessarily matters whether you're volunteering in the community, in a hospital, volunteering with like disadvantaged populations, or even like working for volunteering with a company. Like, I know one of my classmates at UBC med school, he worked at Walmart before, and then he actually set up like a charity initiative with the Walmart so that they could donate some of the products that they would throw away. They could donate to the food bank, or help donate to other places. So that might be considered volunteering with a company. So I don't think one type of volunteering is preferred over the other. That being said, like, if you're volunteering for not to harm anyone, but if you're volunteering for something very extreme, like anti-abortion rights or something like that, that may not necessarily be looked on favorably, or something to that regard, or something very controversial per se. But as far as the general kind of bread and butter volunteering, no, I don't think any one is preferred over the other. I think like a lot of people have the notion that you need to do like a very specific kind of volunteering, or like a hospital volunteering or a crisis line or something like that. And a lot of people do that, and a lot of people do get in, but it's not necessarily the case. And if a lot of people are doing that kind of thing, then you're competing with other people who are applying. You're kind of doing the same volunteering as them. So if you do have something that's different, it may be just looked at in a different light. But I can't comment on whether that's actually better or worse. But yeah.
But so you mean you want to stand out? You don't want to do what everyone else is doing. So step outside the box and do other types of volunteering roles.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like, and another way to put it, absolutely. Like, if you've been volunteering at a place for a very long time, and it is seen as more typical pre-med volunteering, that's totally fine too, as long as you have that commitment that you've been doing it for a long time, or that you've progressed in that role, or you've added other things to that role. Because like I said, the two biggest things are like your level of commitment, like how many hours or how long have you been doing it, and then what kind of things have you done in that role. So yeah, if you do have something different, that's totally great. And if you don't, it's not going to hurt you, but then you might need to work a little bit harder, because other people might have that same kind of volunteer activity or extracurricular. And like on extracurriculars, it doesn't just have to be volunteer. Like I said, it could be work related as well. It could be research related. I know some people in my class too, like, you can talk about circumstances at home, like some people wrote about being a parent, or like some people wrote about taking care of a sick relative in their kind of list of things that you could talk about. Because it's not necessarily just like formal like research or leadership or volunteering positions. There's a lot of informal ways that you might be helping to make the community or the world a better place. And whether you're a parent or whether you've taken care of a sick family member or whatever, you can definitely add all that in the thing.
Sounds good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And so I just had one last question for the extracurriculars, and we can move on to research, academics. Is there any volunteer experience related roles that maybe you can recommend to students right now? Because a lot of students, they don't know how to get involved. Where do they go to get involved? They don't know where to get these opportunities. Do you know any opportunities you can think of? Any ways, paths you recommend they go through to find these opportunities?
Yeah, you know what? That's a great question, and I think a lot of people that come to these talks, a lot of people like yourself, you're very committed and you want to do something, but you're not necessarily sure what to do or what necessarily needs to be done. So some of the like aside from kind of running in the elections, which if people are interested in politics, I think you should definitely do that, or just interested in general. But some of the things that I did. Where I remember one of my friends who got in from SFU, he went to SFU career counseling, and they kind of gave a list of options that like places that within SFU that he could volunteer at. So one of them started volunteering at SFU Health and Counseling services. I know another friend, he got his volunteering out from like clubs day. He found some clubs that were doing some work in the community. Like I think one of them was doing like blood donations, and he joined from there. And then so a lot of it is kind of more of it's going to be from like expanding your network and seeing what kind of things people are doing. So like I said, one of them joined the club's network, and he knew like a girl who was doing blood donation drives, so he joined that. Another one went to SFU career counseling, and they provided him with a list of options. I went to the business school as well, and they were very keen on like getting you involved in the community and posting about opportunities for networking and for volunteering with the business school. So that was one of the other things that I did. As far as if there was there's no place that where you can go and find like a list of like great volunteering opportunities. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist. But those would probably be some of the places to start. So like SFU career counseling, looking at the clubs at SFU and seeing if some of them are more in line to your interests, and then kind of going from there. Yeah, those are probably the main ones. It's a little bit harder now too because the whole pandemic and everything else that's come with it.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes things tougher too because now you're not able to see those those postings in person or whatever it be.
Yeah, it's definitely harder. But hopefully, once we get back on campus, hopefully we can hop on those opportunities. But yeah, so I wanted to gear the discussion now towards research. Did you have any research prior to medical school, or no?
And then, sorry, just to quickly backtrack on that, I think a great way to be involved in like extracurriculars is also just to let people know you're looking, like talking about your network. So now that you've asked me, now that if there's anything that comes along that like I might need people for volunteering for or like an extracurricular activity, I'll come to Ramni or I'll come to you and I'll post it and be like, there's this opportunity that people are excited about, and it might be a good way to get some volunteering hours in and help build your resume. So I think that's another thing too, is networking, that to let people know that even if there isn't an opportunity, that to keep you in mind in the future, so when something does come up, they'll reach out to you.
We appreciate that. Yeah, that's a brilliant point. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of research, did you have any research or no prior to medical school?
Yeah. So I'm not a big researcher. You have to do research at medical school. I hated doing research, even in medical school. So prior to medical school, no, I did not do a single ounce of research. I didn't even know what research was. Yeah, like some people in my class like published in like really crazy journals even prior to medical school, and then some of them like in medical school they published in like Nature and those kind of places, and some of them will go on to have great research careers, but medical school, like you don't necessarily have to do research. Like when you are in medical school, it's a bit of an expectation, but I don't think I was disadvantaged in any way by not having research. But that being said, like if you're in a lab and that's something you're passionate about, definitely do it, because at the end of the day, whether it's volunteering or whether it's research or whether it's a job, the things that you like, you're going to be a lot more happy doing them, because if the reason you're only doing something is to get build your resume for medical school or whatever, like that's definitely nothing wrong with that. But you might burn out a little bit more, or you might not have that same satisfaction as opposed to doing something you like.
The drive won't be there.
Yeah, exactly. That drive won't be there, and you won't be as passionate about it. You'll burn out. You won't do it for as long. But if you do something you like, and it helps you build your resume, that's great. But then at the same time, you're also doing something you want to do, so it's easier on your kind of on your brain in that regard.
So go towards your passion. If research is your passion, go for it.
Yeah,
it'll help you down the road. Yeah,
absolutely.
Can I just pop in here real quick? For
Yeah.
anyone that is interested in research and wants to publish their research, STEM Fellowship, the national organization, does have a journal. So if you're looking for places to publish your research, feel free to email us or just Google search it, because I think that'd be a great place to get started.
thank you for adding that, Remy. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and
interested.
Yeah, and to further talk about research, like I think you can get involved with your kind of SFU science, like mentors or people in that community. And research is good, especially if you're thinking about doing a master's. If you don't go into medical school right away, because that's also something that needs to be thought in the back of your mind. Research is a really good way to kind of set yourself up for something else. And it's definitely not going to harm you, like I said, but you only have so many hours in a day or hours in a week, right? And time is a valuable resource. So, if you're thinking, should I do research, or should I do volunteering, or should I do work, or should I do this or that? At the end of the day, you have to do what you're gonna like, because one thing is not necessarily better than the other.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's a very important point. We often forget that we start just chasing after filling our resume, filling our profile.
Yeah.
But yeah, the passions usually stand out. So I wanted to ask you, because a lot of us, obviously, your GPA is very important. I'm sure you must have kept a good GPA. So what can you tell us in terms of your academics? How are you able to keep your grades under control? Any tips you have?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's the other side of it too. Like when you apply to UBC, they'll get 50% of your grades and 50% of your like non-academic qualifications. So your like extracurriculars per se. So grades is half the battle. So I think that's something you don't want to forget. And that's something that is more quantitative. The better grades you are, the better score you'll get for that aspect of things. So yeah, I was able to keep a good GPA at SFU while I was there. And I think the main thing is with far as keeping grades and those kind of things go, is you have to get on top of it early. So I think when I went from high school to university, like that first semester was a bit of a shocker, because you don't realize like how big of a change it is. And like there's 500 people in class, and they teach you a whole week's worth of stuff in a 1 hour class, and then you have to really take that responsibility to learn things for yourself and kind of be an independent or self-started learner. So some of the things that helped me keep my grades up were having so I have a twin brother, so just having my twin brother and my cousin, we all took the same classes and stuff. So forming like a study group to keep yourself motivated and to keep things fun. I mean, for me, usually doing things in a group is a lot more fun than doing it alone. So I was able to build a few friends that way in that regard. And then we were able to form a study group that kept ourselves motivated. It is a big one for sure. Because sometimes it's like you just don't feel like studying, but if you have other friends around, it makes it a little bit easier. Other things is some people think you have to take like 5 classes every semester because that's what like looks good at like UBC or whatever. I don't think that's necessarily true. for some of the Ontario schools, like when you apply to like Western or like University of Toronto and stuff, they definitely want to see at least 1 year where you've taken like 30 credits in 2 semesters. But UBC doesn't care about that. So I'll speak more about UBC because I went there, but I do know about some of the other Ontario schools. So early on, like especially if you're still in your first or second year or whatever, or, you don't necessarily have to have like 100% full course load. So I think I started off taking 4 classes and then 4 classes and kind of worked like that because it's a little bit more manageable. And like I said, you might be doing other things. So I was working and I was volunteering and stuff. So that made things a little bit easier. Like you can lighten the load, and it doesn't necessarily look at it as a bad thing. But you want to keep it in the back of your mind that you eventually will have to do a year where you're doing like a full course load because they want to see if you can be able to handle that.
So can we pause right there? Just had a question.
Yeah.
So basically it comes down to you have 2 options. You either cut out your Eastern schools and you focus on, because I know Alberta is also, you can apply with 4 courses a semester. So you have 2 options, whether you either cut out your Eastern options and stick to the Western options, including UBC, and stay with 4 courses a semester, or you take 5 and you keep everything open. Now, obviously, it's a decision everyone has to make. But what would you recommend? Because you've been through that process. Do you think it's worth the time and energy to keep a 5-course, full course load throughout the 3 year, because most of them require last 3 years of the undergrad? Do you think it's worth doing that?
Yeah, 3 years of the undergrad. That being said, a lot of people will it's 3 years of undergrad they take, but then you apply after 3 years and you usually get in after 4 years. That being said, some people are very spectacular and they could apply after 2 years and then they get in after 3 years, kind of a thing. So that being said, I don't think it's necessarily a either or option. It's not a dichotomy, or it's not as binary. You can have like both per se, but just with the caveat that if you will take a lightened course load, some of the schools do want to see a full course load. So I think, like I said, it has to be like individualized to each person. I can't answer this question as a blanket statement, like you've already pointed out. So it's not necessarily a strategy, but like I said, if you're taking a slightly less course load, allows you to keep better grades, and then you're able to, in that final year or that third year, you're able to take a full course load to kind of to prove to the other schools that you can do that. That might be something that works out better in your favor to be able to maintain better grades. But that's something you have to look at, whether, like I would look into I don't know all the criteria anymore for the Ontario schools or for like Edmonton, like University of Alberta and those kind of things. But I think I do still recall them wanting 30 credits in a year, but for some of them it only has to be for 1 year. So university is 4 years. So the other 3 years, if you do take a little bit light in course load, and then in that final year you take a more heavier course load, I don't think you're necessarily putting yourself at a disadvantage in any means. But some people might be able to do 5 courses and they're doing totally great, and that's great for them. If you're able to maintain that kind of course load and then maintain the grades, that's what's going to matter more. But I think it's better to have the grades up here and take a slightly lower course load than have a crazy course load, but you're dropping in your grades.
I see. That's an important point. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. So I just had like 2 questions left, and then we can open the floor for some Q&A.
Yeah.
So do you have any regrets? Do you have any regrets now? Anything you wish you have done differently in the past, right? Since you're through medical school, now you're almost just the residency left, right? Any major regrets, right? Or
any major regrets? Oh, that's a good question. I wouldn't say any major regrets. No, nothing major. I think like the whole application process and stuff would have been easier if I started to think about it earlier. Like I was kind of, you always think about it in the back of your mind, and I was doing the volunteering stuff and I was doing the extracurriculars, but it's nice to get a feel for like what the application actually entails. So I read the application a few weeks before I applied, and I was a bit surprised because I didn't necessarily know all the things in it. So even if you're still in first year or second year, or you want to apply 2-3 years down the road, or even next year, it might be a good idea to look at, because they might have changed from, I applied like, oh my God, like 5 years ago now. 4 years in med school, you apply a year before. But you want to look at like what are the requirements for each of the universities you're applying to, and whether that's in British Columbia or Alberta or out in Ontario or whatever, and see what you need to do to meet those requirements. Because it would suck if you, like, for example, you know, you needed 30 credits in a year and you didn't realize that, and then when you apply to a school, your like application gets disqualified or whatever. So that'd be one thing. Because actually I applied after 3 years and I realized I actually wasn't able to apply to the Ontario schools because they needed a full year course load, and I was planning to do that in my 4th year. But luckily I got in at UBC. But so it's just something that I would have had to wait an extra year to apply for. It wouldn't have been the end of the world. But so that's just one thing too. Like, if you know that's something you want to do, like, look at the requirements early, because it could save you a lot of time and it allows you to kind of plan things better. The second thing I would say, also at the same time though, it's not like, you know, if you get in after 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year, or you take a little bit extra time, it might feel like a lot in the moment, but you know, everyone finishes med school as a doctor. It doesn't matter when you get in. We had people who, you know, came in after their PhDs, or people who are in their 30s or even mid 30s, or, you know, people who are all the way from like 19. So you know, you can also enjoy university or like undergrad at the same time. It's a fun experience. I had a great time. So I would say, you know, otherwise life moves so fast that, you know, you're always trying to push the rock forward, right? Like trying to work hard, you're pushing it. It's nice to kind of look up once in a while and, you know, smell the roses, as people kind of say. Yeah. So that'd be the only other advice. And then finally, I guess, is like, whatever you're passionate about, whatever you're like it's going to be a lot easier for you if you move forward with that, than to, and, you know, do your volunteering or your extracurriculars around that, as opposed to trying to build like the ideal resume per se, because the going with the latter strategies can be like a lot more beneficial for you. Because I remember I had a friend, he was doing like hospital volunteering, and not to harp on that, that's great if you like that, but like he could not do it, and he just dropped it after 6 months, and he felt like he wasted so much time and stuff like that, and then that wasn't gonna look good on his application or whatever. Everything eventually all worked out, but I don't think that stress was necessarily worth it for him. So it's just something to consider. Yeah, but no regrets. And also med school is great. I would definitely go to med school if you had the opportunity.
That's awesome. Definitely going to take those into consideration. I think all of us here.
Yeah.
Sure. So before I say the last question, I do want to open the floor for questions. So if you do have a question, you can type it in the chat now, and we'll go through them. So you guys can, if you have any questions, throw them in. And the last question I have for you is, in your opinion, what is the main factor that prevents prospective medical students from getting accepted into medical school?
That's a loaded question there, Kar.
Just in your opinion, because you must have had friends that probably had to apply once or 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
So what is that factor you think that people have to, that they don't realize they have to pass?
So there's 2 kind of things to it. If someone keeps getting interviews and they don't get in, it's probably their interview that keeps them from getting in more than anything. Because after you get an interview, this is just hearsay, right? But most people say it's actually all about the interview. So if you have someone who's, you know, has the good resume, good grades, and they keep getting interviews and they don't get in, that's probably the biggest thing. But, you know, you have to cross that bridge when you actually do get an interview. So if you're looking at more of the prospective applicant pool of the people who are trying to get interviews and those kind of things, I would say honestly, the advice I would say is like, you realize like your resume is actually a lot bigger than you think it is. Like when you apply to UBC, there's like 24 categories of things that you can put in. And I would actually recommend to everyone when they do apply is to just like fill it up as much as possible. Like I know some people who only put in their like volunteering or their work, and that was kind of all it. But like I remember when I applied, like I had my grandpa had cancer and I took care of him while he had cancer, so I put that in there. I put like kind of like the soccer coaching that I did. I put in like things from high school, like just trying to like when you do apply is like fill up all the categories, and because you're only going to get points added, you'll never get points taken off kind of a thing. So that's just a general, like when you're applying, that's kind of the one benefit. Otherwise, I would say as far as to why prospective applicants don't get in, it could be for like a multitude of reasons, like whether it's your grades or whether it's your extracurriculars or whatever. But I think another big one is people might get discouraged if they've applied and they realize, their application wasn't as strong as they liked. Yeah, then because then and then they only apply once and they might go abroad, or they might give up on that dream. I think another key thing is perseverance and persistence, and those are really important factors when applying, because when you apply 2, 3, 4 times and then you get in, it actually feels so much more sweeter, or you're still going to be a doctor at the end of the day, and everything else. So I would say actually the biggest limitation more than anything is probably like perseverance, right? Like don't give up on yourself and kind of believe in the things you've done, and keep working hard, because like you have to apply a year out, and then it takes like 6 months to figure out like when you got an interview or not. And then by the time the full application cycle is done, it gets ready for time to apply again. So in that year, you still want to be doing all the things you were doing, and all the things you liked, and you don't want to stop all that now that because you've all applied, and it won't count for this year. So you got to be thinking like long term as well, like a few years ahead. So just keep perseverance, keep like working on yourself and working on that resume and everything.
Right. Lots of value there. So anyone? Okay, here we have a question from Nina. So how did you study for the Mcat? Did you take a semester off?
Yeah, hi Nina. This is a great question. The Mcat is definitely something that you have to consider. As far as UBC, they don't look at the Mcat until after you get an interview. So that's just something to note. How did I study for the Mcat? I took I didn't take any of the prep courses or anything. I studied with like the typical Kaplan and exam cracker books. I did take the semester off, but that being said, I was working like 35 hours a week. So this was in the summer when I studied for it. But I still think that was easier, because then I'm not studying for classes and then having to study for like the MCAT at the same time. So even though I was still busy, like I wasn't as cognitively busy, like my mind wasn't as heavy per se. So I think that approach worked well for me. And I was planning to work the whole summer anyway, so I'm like, oh, I can work and then study outside of work. So that's how I studied scheduling. I also built a study schedule and had the friends that were doing the MCAT. So I think kind of being organized and committed to what you're going to study like each week really helped as well. Great question. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see here. We got some more questions from Angel. I know grades are very important for med school. But do some C's in your transcript have a bad impact on your application, given there's an upward trend in your GPA?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think I know like a few people who probably had a C or 2 in their application. I don't think 1 or 2 is going to necessarily make a difference. After you're done 4 years or like 120 credits, UBC will drop like the worst year or whatever. But that being said, then you have to apply like after 4 years. So you have to finish all your undergrad and everything or whatever, or you have to finish 120 credits and then apply. So you might want to figure out what you're going to be doing for the extra year. But I don't think it's necessarily a detriment, especially if there is an upward trend in your GPA. Like it's not gonna look at it and be like, wow, this person isn't gonna see, like, no, that doesn't necessarily matter. But what I would do then is just kind of, you know, if you continue to work hard, continue to get the better grades, keep that upward trend. I think that's more important. And your overall GPA is going to be more important than any one letter grade.
We have another question here from Muhammad Islam. What could a high school student in either grade 10 or 11 do to prepare for med school or for undergrad? We have some young audience here.
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely I didn't have the wherewithal to ask those kind of questions when I was in grade 10 or 11, for sure. I think, like I said, med school might be the end goal, but then once you get into med school, the end goal is like residency or whatever. I think you want to, you know, cross the next bridge that's going to come. So instead of, you know, necessarily preparing for med school, you want to prepare yourself to do well in undergrad, right? Like you want to prepare yourself to have those really high grades in undergrad that will then help you get into med school. So like, how could a grade 10 or 11 student do it? Is like, it's more necessarily building those study habits that will really let you do well in like undergrad, or, you know, if you know what classes you're going to take in undergrad. See if your high school offers like AP classes or whatever, because those will either give you credits or those will prepare you for when you're going to take those classes in undergrad. So those would be the main kind of things. So it's like that same thing. It's like you got to build those study habits. You have to work hard. So that's the grade side of things, and just know which classes you're going to take. And, you know, if you have see if your high school offers kind of advanced classes for that. So that's more the grade sides. As far as the extracurriculars, it'd be like the same thing. Like I started working when I was like in grade 10 or something like that. So, you know, whether you want to get a job or whether you want to start volunteering, it doesn't have to be like anything exuberant. But if you start early, it's only going to look better, right? Like someone who is applying to med school and they started volunteering in the second year versus someone who started doing something that kind of volunteering early on, it would look more favorably. But like I said, you have to do something that you like. Otherwise, you probably won't stick to it for very long. And just because you've started something later, when you realize you want to go to med school, that in itself is not a detriment either. But it's good to know if you know you are thinking that road. It's just, you know, start doing those study habits and start kind of volunteering or doing the working or whatever.
We have another question here from Callie. How many Mcat full length did you do? Did you do content review, then tackle the practice tests?
Yeah, that's a good question, Callie. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to answer too well. So I wrote when I wrote the Mcat, I wrote like what was called the new Mcat back then, which is based out like the 528 or something like that. It is the 4 sections. So when I did the Mcat, I was one of the first people to write the brand new Mcat, and there was only one full-length practice test. So I did one full-length practice test. I don't necessarily know if that was if there was more, I would have done more. But I only had one. So that's it.
We have another question here. Can you tell us about, from Haydar, can you tell us about the residency application, please? What are some of the requirements they're looking for?
Yeah, again, that's like the golden question. So like, I don't know if people know this or not, but med school in Canada is all pass-fail. There's no A, B, C, D, nothing like that. It's just pass-fail. So we have a saying that P equals MD, right? Like pass equals medical degree. So they don't look at your grades for residency applications. So in 4th year, you do electives. So I think your electives will matter, like, so that they can see that you're interested in the field of the residency you're applying for. So if you're applying for like pediatrics, they want to see you doing electives in like pediatrics, obstetrics, things that are relevant to that. If you're applying for something like neurosurgery, something you do neurosurgery electives, neurosurgery research, and that kind of thing. So like it'd probably be a tough question to answer in terms of like what they're looking for, but I would say like you want strong reference letters from whichever field you're applying for. You want to do electives in the field that you're applying for, and then also like it probably doesn't matter for some of the other programs, but if you're applying to something very niche, like say like radiology or like a neurosurgery, or like you want a very specialized thing, then research in that field will help too. And when you get into medical school, there's a lot of opportunities for research. So I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about the residency application now, but it's kind of like med school again, but you just apply to residency programs across the country.
Another question from Nina. Did you ever feel like you were at a disadvantage by not completing a degree either in your application or after being accepted?
No, definitely not. I mean, I applied after third year. I think a lot of people apply after third year or fourth year and who might have not necessarily completed the degree. So I definitely don't think I was at a disadvantage in terms of being accepted. Well, funny thing though, what actually happens is like the people who say did a master, people who might have gone in a little bit later, who did a master's or who did more research or those kind of things, when they apply to residency programs, their resume might actually look a little bit more impressive because they have that master's or they have other kind of, they've actually done a degree. But as far as getting into med school, no, it doesn't matter. And you know, if you're lucky enough to get in early, I would definitely go get in.
I have a question here from Kelly. If you don't get accepted into med immediately after completing your undergrad, would you say it's beneficial to pursue a master's degree and apply again?
You know, like that's a very individualized question. I never did a master's or anything like that. But that is a real question to ask, is like, what am I going to do in the event that I don't get in? So I don't think I'm probably the right person to speak on whether a master's degree is the right thing, because I barely know what that entails. All I know is that some people have done it, or they went into a master's degree to whether improve their grades or to improve their extracurriculars or their research, or see if that's something they want to pursue. I think some schools will give you like a bonus to your GPA if you do get a master's. But, you know, like you can, but I don't think I would have done a master's just for the sake of like going to med school, because like I said, I don't like research or anything like that. So that's why I was doing more of the business side of things as well, or I would have done maybe something like computer engineering or something a little bit more marketable skills for that regard. But that's probably someone I would talk to, either like that's a question I'd probably either talk to like the career counseling or whatever, because then like what happens if you get a master's degree and like unfortunately you still don't get in, what are you going to do now then, kind of thing. So that's probably a question better suited to talk to career counseling. Then it also depends on what your master's degree is and everything else.
I had a question. I wanted to ask you in terms of international schools. So a lot of, only 20% I think of Canadian students actually get accepted, eligible applicants, right? The 80%, there's a huge amount of people that want to still be doctors. Yeah. If you apply once, twice, and do you recommend that person to still, if they really want to be a doctor, do you recommend they go to international school? Say you have the Caribbean islands, you have Ireland, you have Hungary, you have all these options. But the Caribbean islands is quite interesting because you do the USMLE and you actually get an American license, right? And then you can transfer and do your MCQEs. What do you have to say about that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good question and something to think about in the back of your mind. Again, I probably won't be the best person to speak on this because, I never applied to those schools. I just went to UBC. But if medicine is something you really want to do, it might be warranted. But there's the few caveats that why I didn't apply is one, it's crazy expensive. Like it costs like over like $500,000 or something like that. So that was not the kind of money I or my family had. So it just was an option for me in that regard. Second thing is you'll have to like live abroad and then do your live abroad for a bit. So that's something to consider. And also doing the rotation in the States and then potentially having to do residency in the States as well. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, and it is a legitimate way to, you know, become a doctor. So if that's something you really want to do and you felt like you applied like 3 times and you haven't gotten in Canada, it might be worth it to go abroad. But some of your options are going to be a lot more limited in terms of the residencies that you're going to be able to apply to for the most part. Also, it's going to be limited into probably where you get residency. And your chances of getting the residency will be less. But, you know, like I said, I know people who totally went abroad and they got like a great residency, or, you know, they went abroad and then they did their residency in like New York and they're working here now, kind of thing. But like, to answer the question, if that's your passion, you know, you can definitely apply, but whether the specifics on that, I don't think I'll be able to answer that properly for you.
Right, well, yeah, thanks for answering to your best of your ability. We appreciate that. Yeah, let's see. Do we have any more questions? Yeah.
I got a quick question just to butt in quickly. Yeah, so I'm a guy that really likes, you know, good sleep. So I was wondering, like, my main kind of interest is like, could you tell us like the difference in workload between undergrad, med school, and now residency? Like,
yeah. You know, I like to sleep too, but you know, I think you kind of just, you get accustomed to where you're at, and then you go up to the next step, and then you get accustomed to where you're at, and you go up to the next step. So they say med school is like drinking from like a fire hose, and that like it's just like you're getting so much information at once, kind of thing. So you're getting blasted. So it was definitely a big step up in medical school. But then that was the first year, and then by the second year it gets easier. And then when in the third year you're in hospital and you're doing call, like you're doing like the 24-hour shifts or whatever, then that gets hard. And then my fourth year gets easier again. And then once you get to residency, you're doing a lot more call, a lot more responsibility, and you're like, this is tough for sure. So as far as the sleep, I mean, I think I slept decently well. I think, you know, there's going to be some rotations or some parts of medical school where you're going to sleep less, and some where you'll sleep more. That being said, in residency, generally more or less the first year, everyone has it pretty rough. And then, you know, it depends on your program or, you know, what kind of things you want to do. So it's like I said, I like to sleep as well. That's why I didn't do some of the more demanding specialties like obstetrics or like a surgical residency, because the hours are quite gruesome. You know, so those are all decisions that you can make when you get into med school. But I would say the workload is manageable for sure.
We have another question here from Hader. Did you write your MC QE right after med school? How did you prepare for it?
Yeah, the MCCQE. So it's one of the tests you have to write after med school. It's called the Medical Council of Canada Qualifying Examination. For people that don't know what it is, it's basically like an end of med school exam. You gotta pay like $1,300 to write it, which is a scam. I mean, yeah, I read Toronto notes. I wrote it after med school. I mean, I think like the pass rate for Canadian grads is like 98 to 99% because of like our training and stuff like that. And the fact that we know we have to write this exam, and, you know, they prepare us well for it. So I definitely wouldn't be stressed about the NCCQE. But I read Toronto notes and I think it was fine. But I think most people in my class could probably not study and pass. But yeah, I would say I just read Toronto notes.
So it looks like any other last questions?
Great questions, by the way. So, you know, keep them coming. There's no such thing as a silly question or anything like that.
Yes. Yeah, guys. Any questions? There we go. Oh, he said. I did asking why family medicine? Why did you choose family medicine?
Yeah, I chose family medicine. Yeah, no, great question. I think I chose family medicine more for the versatility and the autonomy. You get to work as much as you want or as little as you want. Family medicine is pretty like wide spectrum. Like some family doctors do obstetrics where they're delivering babies. Some work in the ERs. Some work in the hospitals, like on the medical floors. So there's a huge spectrum of practice that you can do. Also, the fact that the residency is 2 years compared to like 4 years or 5 years for a lot of other residencies also makes it a lot easier choice. So then I chose it for the autonomy, right? Like you can build your schedule and work as much or as little as you want. So I think early on in my career, or like in the winter months, I might want to work more, but in the summer, I might want to take more time off. So the flexibility is probably the biggest thing. And the spectrum of practice, like I'll work a little bit in the clinic, I'll do some hospital work as well, and then kind of go from there.
That answered your question, Haidar.
I had a quick question for the residency. So like, do you have to do like residency in a hospital after medical school, or could you also do it in like a practice or something?
No, you have to do it in a hospital. Like, I mean, like all residencies in Canada are going to be university affiliated anyways. So like you will be part of a practice as well, like depending on what kind of residency you do. Like you'll still have like office days and stuff like that, but most training is delivered in the hospital.
All right, looks like we don't, any other questions? Looks like we don't have. So to close it off, so we have plenty of students with us here today that are aspiring physicians. Do you have anything to tell them so that they're closer to their dream of becoming a doctor?
Yeah, that's a great question, Karar. I think what I would say is kind of what I've been going from the start is, do what you're passionate about. You'll be a lot better at it, and it'll be a lot easier for you. I think that's the main thing. And also, perseverance is kind of the most important thing. You need to work hard to maintain your grades. You need to work hard to make the time for the extracurriculars and apply. And if fortunately it doesn't work, apply again. I think because I think being able to take a step back and keep moving forward is going to be a lot more important in life and for work and everything else, as opposed to kind of a generic blanket advice. I think that'd probably be the best thing I would say is, do what you're passionate about and like work hard, and apply multiple times. And then as more specific advice is, look at the schools that you want to apply for and make sure you know what the requirements are and what kind of things it entails. That'd probably be the more specific one.
Right. Well, it was a pleasure having you with us, Jas, here today. I'm sure all of us benefited, and we wish you the best in your career. And thank you for giving us your time. And thank you. I want to also thank the audience for coming. Without you, we wouldn't be able to have this. We appreciate your time as well. And I also do want to thank the rest of my team members. STEM takes a lot of effort to do these. So Ramni, Gary, Callie, Megan, I forgot other names, Jessica, everyone else. Sorry if I missed any other names, but appreciate everyone. So yeah, thank you for being here, Jas, and I'll give it back to Ramni.
Yeah, and so I was just going to add quickly is, I think you said any advice for any aspiring physicians is also, it's a great career. It's definitely worth it. It's more fun than I could imagine for sure. So definitely recommend it to everyone. And then also simultaneously, if people have more questions or, they might have questions they don't necessarily want to ask on the chat or more specific things, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or wherever, or Twitter or anything like that, and Facebook. It's just Jas Hans, and shoot me a message, and then hopefully I can answer some of your other questions.
Awesome, thank you.
No worries.
Thanks so much. And so for any students that we still have here, make sure you sign up for our mailing list, and so we can let you know when we have more events like this. We probably won't be having more for the rest of the semester other than the one coming up at 2 p.m. today. but definitely next semester. And if there's specific careers that you want to hear from, let us know so that we can reach out to people in those fields and try to get those kinds of careers here so that you can learn even more. Yeah. All right. So I think we can end that there.